Hi there, Addie. Today we are going to go over the quadratic equation. This is the continuation of lesson number 11 in your book, and if you want to follow along, it's on page 87. Okay, first of all, wouldn't this be funny if this happened on Noah's Ark, like the Titanic? Like, oh my goodness, it just struck me as funny. Anyway, let's jump in. This lesson is about solving quadratic equations. A quadratic equation is one that looks like this. You can put it in this form. And the way we learned how to do it in a previous lesson is to complete the square. That means you take something that looks like this and make it into a formula that looks like this. That way you can square root both sides and this cancels out, and you can isolate x and find the answer there for x. Okay, so it turns out that we showed you the hard way first, and that there's an easier way to do this problem. In fact, there's a formula that you don't have to memorize the formula, because when you see the formula, it's going to be like crazy long. But a lot of times on math tests, you can write down this formula, or they will give you the formula. I mean, if you do it enough times, you'll memorize it. But all you need to do is plug in A, B, and C into the formula, and then you'll get the right answer for x. So I'm gonna show you, I kind of want to show you how that's done. But first, the first thing that they do in the book is that they show you how to derive that equation. Look at Jim's face when I paused it right there. That's probably your face right now. If you take an equation that looks like this, a quadratic equation, what would happen if we just use variables and solve it the way we have been by completing the square? If you do that, you'll end up with the formula, the quadratic formula. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do that really quick. So the first thing that we're gonna do, let's take this formula and let's just solve for x. So the first thing that we're gonna do is get rid of this a, right? Because we want the x to be isolated, and that's what we were doing to complete the square. So let's divide everything by a. Just every term. This is also divided by a, but of course it's just gonna be 0 over there. So we can just get rid of that, because 0 divided by anything, right, is just gonna be 0. Okay, now when we do that, these a's cancel out, and so we're left with this, and we can write that a little bit differently in a form that you might be more familiar with. Let's just make it a little bit different here, just kind of like that. So now that makes it so that it's clear that this is the new coefficient there. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is isolate these x's on one side and bring this to the other side. So when we do that, we're going to end up with x squared plus b over a x. And I'm going to put plus, well, no, I won't put the plus, but I'm just going to put a parentheses. I'm expecting a third term right there that we're going to get to in a minute. And we're going to bring that negative ca to the other side, and I'm going to leave a little space like that. So you recognize this is what we were doing when we were completing the square. We would get it to this point. And do you remember how we would get this third term here? What we would do is we would take this coefficient, b over a, we would divide it in half or multiply it by a half, and then we would square that whole term. And once we do that, that's how we would add the term here, and we add the term to the other side. So when you do that, you get, for an answer of this little thing, is you get b squared over 4a squared. Okay, so now I'm going to put this here, b squared over 4a squared. And I'm going to put it on the other side too, b squared over 4a squared. Okay, so now I can erase this. Okay, and now that you've done that, it's just kind of math that you already know how to do to kind of simplify everything. Now we write this term as a paired term. So remember how we're trying to get to completing the square. The next thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to get this to be in that different formula where you're completing the square. So you're trying to get it to look like x minus h, the quantity squared, equals p. So what two things, if you multiply them out, turn out to be this? And the answer is it's going to be x plus b over 2a, the quantity squared. So do you see how I did that? This is the term before we squared it to that. That's what we've been doing when we complete the square. If you're not following along, don't worry. You just have to basically memorize the formula. On the other side, it's going to be b squared minus, b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. How did we get to that? Oh, we're just combining b squared over 4a squared and this. We're just combining that into this. You can ask me about that later. If we don't get it, we'll take a look at it. Okay, now that we have it to this point, do you remember what we did next? We take the square root of everything. Okay, square root of everything. And when you do that, this cancels out, right? And you're left with that, and then you can solve for x. Okay, I'm just going to solve for x at this point because this is just deriving that formula. If you go through all of that math, you're going to get this, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, now this equation is one that every mathematician knows. They have it memorized in their brain. If you ask ChatGPT or Google or anything, what is the quadratic formula? It will give you this. So what does this mean? This is a formula that you can use to simplify quadratic, believe it or not, to simplify quadratic equations, so you don't have to go through this entire process the whole entire time. Let me show you how. When you go take a test, you're going to have this written on a little sticky note, or you're going to have it in the back of the book or something like that. It probably is in the back of the book. You should look. Then they're going to give you a quadratic equation that looks like this. Okay? All you have to do is figure out what A is, what B is, what C is, and then plug that into this, and you're done. The answer is done. That's it. So here is the formula for a quadratic equation. I'm going to write it underneath. ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Look carefully, okay? Look carefully. This is what a quadratic equation looks like, and this is the equation that they gave you. Now we have to decide what these different things are. So what is A? A is going to be equal to 3. What is B? B is going to be equal to negative 2, right? Because in this equation, it's plus b squared. This is minus 2. So b is equal to negative 2. You got to get those negatives right. What about C? C is going to be equal to 5. Okay, now that we have these numbers, we can solve that equation that they gave us. You don't even have to write this out. You can just look at it and decide what A, B, and C is. So we plug A, B, and C into that. So the first thing I'm going to do is write that out again. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, now I'm going to plug in what I know. X equals negative b. Negative b, ooh, this is tricky. They're trying to trick us. So a negative 2 is going to be a positive 2. So positive 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared, because that's b right here. See what I'm doing? Okay, minus 4 times a, which is 3. We decided it was 3. C, which is 5. Okay. And then do that all over 2 times a, which is 3, right? Okay, then you just plug all this in and solve it, and then you have the answer to your quadratic equations. Let's start here. What is negative 2 squared? 2 times 2 is 4, right? So let's erase this and do 4. It's just kind of an order of operations thing. So you have to do all of this multiplication over here first. 3 times 5 is 15 times a negative 4, and then 4 plus that. This whole thing simplifies to 56. Okay, and then on the bottom, this simplifies to 6. Okay, and then turns out that you can simplify this a little more. Just do this, let's get a different color. 2 over 6 plus or minus 56 over 6. So it's going to be x is equal to 1/3 because that's 2 over 6. I just realized this is a negative 56 up there. Did you catch my mistake before? It's a negative 56. So what is the square root of 56? 56 over 6. And I'm going to get rid of some of this other stuff before it gets too confusing. Okay, so remember that 56 is 7 times 8. So I can make this 2 square root 14 I because it was a negative number there. And then 2 over 6 also simplifies to 1 over 3. So now this is the simplified form, and this is the final answer. And we got there just by plugging in A, B, and C. So that's the technically easier way to do it, although I know that was kind of complicated. Thank you for hanging in there. Love you. Bye.